Chapter 2, Echoes of the Abyss. The darkness wasn't silent anymore. It was a cacophony of memories and screams, punctuated by the relentless, ragged gasps clawing from Alex Ora Keen's throat. The hands around her neck squeezed tighter, crushing her windpipe, forcing her blind eyes to bulge and her lips to part in a voiceless plea. The voice in her mind was laughing now. "I told you, darling. You left something behind." But that voice wasn't the one strangling her now. The phantom from her past, the man she knew she had killed, was very real, very alive, and his grip was like a vice. Panic shot through her veins like ice water, her thoughts a tangled mess as her fingers scrabbled against his wrists, trying to pry them loose. No, no, no. This can't be real, she thought. But reality was a slippery concept for her. It always had been. As the pressure on her throat intensified, she let her instincts take over. The knives she kept hidden beneath her pillows were too far out of reach. In a desperate move, she drove her knee up, aiming blindly for the soft flesh between his legs. There was a grunt, a momentary slackening of his grip, just enough for her to twist free and roll off the bed. She hit the floor with a thud, her naked skin burning against the cold hardwood. Her breaths came in shallow, wheezing gulps, the taste of copper on her tongue. The room spun, and she could hear him moving, a lumbering predator stalking her in the dark. "Come now, Alex," he taunted, his voice a smooth baritone that sent shivers of dread racing down her spine. "You thought you'd gotten rid of me. But we both know you can't kill what you can't see." The voice was familiar, maddeningly so, like a nightmare she'd tried to forget. She had torn him apart, she was certain of it. Her hands had been drenched in his blood, her laughter echoing in the dim light of a dirty basement as she made him beg for mercy. But here he was, back from the grave, taunting her in her own sanctuary. Her fingers found the cold steel of a letter opener on the floor. A pitiful weapon, but it was all she had. She gripped it tightly, feeling the metal bite into her palm as she forced herself to stand, her legs trembling beneath her. She turned her head toward the sound of his movements, relying on the echoes, the subtle shifts in the air, to pinpoint him. But the room was filled with too many sounds. The rain outside. The creaking of old pipes. The whispering voices that never left her alone, all rising into a frenzied chorus. "He's not real," they hissed. "This is just another one of your delusions." But the pressure of his hands on her throat had been real. The smell of his sweat, the heat of his breath on her face, it was too vivid to be another hallucination. "Where are you?" she snarled, her voice raw, her knuckles white around the letter opener. "I killed you once. I'll do it again." A low, mocking chuckle came from her right, and she swung wildly, the blade slicing through empty air. She was met with nothing but silence, followed by the lightest touch on her bare shoulder, a finger trailing down her spine like the kiss of death. "I'm everywhere, Alex. And nowhere. Haven't you figured that out by now?" She screamed and spun around, plunging the letter opener into the darkness. This time, it met resistance. The blade sank into flesh, and she heard a satisfying grunt of pain. But then, before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and twisted hard enough that she thought her bones might snap. The makeshift weapon clattered to the floor, useless. "Nice try, sweetheart," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "But it's my turn now." Before she could process what was happening, he had her pinned against the wall. One hand around her throat, the other sliding down her body, exploring with a sickening intimacy that made her skin crawl. She was suffocating, her airways slowly closing as he crushed her windpipe again, and yet, there was an undercurrent of twisted pleasure in his touch. In that moment, she realized what he was after, what he had always been after. It wasn't just about control or revenge. He wanted to break her, to make her feel utterly powerless. Her vision, or what little she could imagine of it, was turning blacker than the darkness she lived in. She was on the brink of unconsciousness when the voice in her head whispered again, not mocking this time, but urgent. Use your teeth, darling. Bite him. With a savage growl, she lunged forward, sinking her teeth into his cheek. The taste of blood flooded her mouth, hot and coppery. He screamed, a sound that was half agony, half fury, and his grip loosened just enough for her to slide free. Gasping for breath, she stumbled away, her head spinning, her legs weak. But she was alive. For now. You bitch, he howled, clutching his face where her teeth had torn into him. She could hear the wet, sticky sound of blood trickling down his cheek. I'll fucking get you for that. But Alex was already moving, her hands blindly feeling along the wall until she found the door to her bathroom. She slammed it shut behind her and locked it, collapsing against the cool tiles. Her throat burned, her ribs ached, and the taste of blood still lingered on her tongue. But she was safe. Or so she thought. The sound of something heavy slamming against the bathroom door sent her heart into overdrive. The wood groaned under the impact. He was coming for her, and she was out of weapons, out of options. Then her fingers brushed against the edge of her razor, the one she kept for cutting her wrists on particularly bad nights. She snatched it up, her hands shaking as she pressed her back against the wall, waiting, listening. The door burst open with a final, deafening crash. He was on her in an instant, a shadow of rage and violence. She didn't hesitate. With a scream of desperation, she drove the razor into his side, feeling the blade slide between his ribs, twisting as he howled in pain. But this time, he didn't go down. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her close, blood pouring from his wound but with an unnatural strength keeping him upright. His breath was hot against her ear as he whispered, "You really thought you could kill me, again?" Her knees buckled as she felt something cold and sharp press against her own stomach. He had a knife of his own, one she hadn't noticed until now. "Looks like we both bleed tonight," he hissed. And with that, the blade plunged into her abdomen. Agony exploded in her core. The world around her shattered into shards of white-hot pain as she collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach, the warm, sticky flow of her own blood soaking her hands. "See you in the next life, Alex," he said, his voice a fading echo as darkness swallowed her whole.